Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd need to defend my own backyard from trespassers, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at you. My name's Jack, and this is the story of how my peaceful suburban life turned into a wild ride of property disputes, rowdy parties, and malicious compliance. It all started about 2 years ago when my wife Sarah and I moved into our dream home in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The house was perfect. 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a huge backyard that backed up to a small wooded area. We were thrilled to finally have some space to ourselves after years of cramped apartment living. The first few months were blissful. We spent weekends gardening, had friends over for barbecues, and even started talking about getting a dog. Our neighbors seemed nice enough, though we didn't interact with them much beyond the occasional wave or good morning as we left for work. That all changed the day I came home early from work with a nasty stomach bug. As I was lying in bed trying not to throw up again, I heard music coming from outside. Figuring it was just one of the neighbors having people over, I tried to ignore it. But after an hour, the music was still blaring, and I could hear what sounded like a lot of voices and laughter. Curiosity got the better of me, and I dragged myself out of bed to investigate. I peeked out the bedroom window that overlooked our backyard and nearly fell over in shock. There were at least 30 people milling around, drinking and chatting. A DJ booth was set up near the tree line, speakers pumping out deafening dance music. Coolers full of beer dotted the lawn, and someone had even set up a slip and slide. What the hell? I muttered, rubbing my eyes in disbelief. For a moment, I wondered if the fever was making me hallucinate. But nope, there was definitely a full-blown party happening in my backyard. I threw on some clothes and stormed outside, ready to unleash hell on these trespassers. As I approached the crowd, a guy who looked to be in his early 30s broke away and walked up to me with a big grin. "Hey man, glad you could make it to the party. I'm Dave, from 2 doors down. Want a beer?" I stared at him in disbelief. "What? No, I don't want a beer. What the hell is going on here? This is my backyard." Dave's smile faltered slightly. I thought this was community property? That's what Tom told me when I moved in last month." "Tom? Who's Tom?" Dave pointed to a heavyset guy manning the grill. "That's Tom over there. He's the president of the homeowner association. Said this area behind the houses was for everyone to use." My head was spinning, and not just from the stomach bug. I marched over to Tom, Dave trailing behind me looking concerned. "Excuse me," I said, tapping Tom on the shoulder. "I'm Jack. I live right there." I pointed at my house. "Can you explain why there's a party in my backyard?" Tom turned around, giving me an easy smile. "Oh hey there, Jack. Glad you could join us. Dave here is new to the neighborhood, so we thought we'd throw him a little welcome bash. Hope you don't mind us using the common area." "Common area? This is my property. I own this land." Tom's smile didn't waver. "Well now, I'm not so sure about that. According to the homeowner association bylaws, this wooded area behind the houses is designated as shared green space for all residents to enjoy. Been that way for years." I felt my blood pressure rising. "That's impossible. When we bought this house, the property line extended well into the woods. I have the deed to prove it." Tom shrugged. "Hey, I'm just going by what's in the bylaws. If you've got an issue with it, you're welcome to bring it up at the next homeowner association meeting. Now, can I get you a burger?" I was too stunned to argue further. I retreated back to the house in a daze, my stomach churning from more than just the virus now. Sarah got home an hour later to find me poring over our mortgage documents and property maps. "Honey, what's going on? Why is there a party in our backyard?" I explained the situation to her, my voice rising in frustration. "I just don't understand. We own this land. How can the homeowner association claim it's common property?" Sarah frowned. "That doesn't sound right at all. Maybe there was a mistake in the bylaws? We should talk to a lawyer." The party finally wound down around 11 p.m. I was too exhausted and sick to do anything but collapse into bed, my mind racing with questions and plans of action. The next day, I called in sick to work and spent hours on the phone, first with our realtor, then the title company, and finally a real estate lawyer. They all confirmed what I already knew. The land was 100% ours, extending a good 50 feet into the wooded area. Armed with this information, I marched over to Tom's house that evening. He answered the door in a bathrobe, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Evening, Jack. What can I do for you?" I thrust a copy of our property deed into his hands. "You can explain this. I've confirmed with multiple sources that we own that land you claimed was common property. Care to tell me why you lied?" Tom's friendly demeanor vanished. He glanced at the paperwork, then tossed it back to me with a scoff. "Look, pal, I don't know what to tell you. The homeowner association bylaws say it's common land, so that's what we go by. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with the board." "Oh, I intend to," I said. "When's the next meeting?" "Next Thursday, 7 p.m. at the community center. But don't expect much to change. We've been using that area for years without any issues. You really want to be the guy who ruins everyone's fun?" I bit back a retort, simply nodding curtly before heading home. Sarah could tell something was wrong as soon as I walked in the door. "How'd it go with Tom?" she asked. I filled her in on the conversation, my frustration mounting with every word. I just don't get it. How can they blatantly ignore our property rights like this? And apparently they've been doing it for years. Sarah squeezed my hand. We'll figure this out, honey. Maybe once we present the evidence at the homeowner association meeting, they'll see reason. I wished I could share her optimism. The next week dragged by agonizingly slowly. I half expected to come home every day to find another raging party in our yard, but thankfully things remained quiet. Finally, Thursday arrived, and Sarah and I headed to the community center, armed with copies of our deed and property maps. The meeting started off normally enough, with discussions about lawn care requirements and a debate over whether to repaint the neighborhood entrance sign. Then Tom called for any new business. I stood up, heart pounding. I'd like to address the issue of property boundaries, specifically regarding the wooded area behind our homes. Tom's eyes narrowed, but he nodded for me to continue. I laid out our case, showing the documents that proved our ownership of the land. As I spoke, I could see a mix of reactions from our neighbors. Some looked surprised, others annoyed, and a few seemed outright angry. When I finished, Tom cleared his throat. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Jack. While I understand your concerns, the fact is that area has been treated as common land for over a decade. Changing that now would deprive the entire neighborhood of a valued shared space. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. I felt my face growing hot. But it's our property, I insisted. We pay taxes on it. You can't just decide to use it without our permission. Dave, the new neighbor, spoke up. Come on, man, don't be selfish. It's not like you were using that space anyway. Why not let everyone enjoy it? Several others chimed in with similar sentiments. I looked to Sarah for support, but she just shrugged helplessly. Tom raised his hands for quiet. All right, folks, I think we've heard enough. I propose we put it to a vote. All in favor of maintaining the wooded area as common property, raise your hands. Nearly every hand in the room went up. I stared in disbelief as Tom smugly recorded the tally. Motion passes? Now, moving on to our next order of business. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. As soon as it adjourned, Sarah and I bolted for the exit, ignoring the dirty looks from our neighbors. Once we were in the car, I let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. I can't believe this. I fumed. They can't just vote away our property rights. This has to be illegal. Sarah sighed. I know, honey, but fighting the whole neighborhood on this, I'm not sure it's worth it. Maybe we should just let it go? I shook my head vehemently. No way. This is our land, and I'm not going to roll over and let them take it. I'm calling our lawyer first thing tomorrow. True to my word, I was on the phone with our attorney as soon as his office opened the next morning. He listened to my story with growing concern. Well, Jack, the good news is they absolutely cannot claim your land as common property just because they've been using it. The bad news is that depending on how long this has been going on, they might have a case for adverse possession. My stomach dropped. Adverse possession? What's that? Basically, if someone openly uses a piece of property for a long enough time without the true owner objecting, they can claim ownership. The specifics vary by state, but it's typically around 10 years. I groaned, and Tom said they've been using it for over a decade. So what, we're just screwed? Not necessarily, the lawyer said. If you can prove that you or the previous owners gave permission for the land to be used, that would negate any adverse possession claim. And there are other factors to consider. I'd need to do some more research into the specifics of your case. We talked for a while longer, discussing options and next steps. By the time I hung up, I had a plan of action, but I knew it wasn't going to be cheap or easy. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I threw ourselves into research. We dug through old homeowner association minutes, property records, and even tracked down the previous owners of our house. Slowly but surely, we built our case. We discovered that about 15 years ago, the original developer of the neighborhood had allowed residents to use the wooded area while the final phase of construction was underway. But that permission was never formalized or extended once the development was complete. The homeowner association had simply continued operating as if they had a right to the land. Armed with this information, we filed a formal complaint with the Homeowner Association Board and sent cease and desist letters to Tom and the other board members. We made it clear that while we weren't opposed to our neighbors enjoying the woods, it needed to be with our express permission as the legal property owners. The response was swift and hostile. Tom called an emergency homeowner association meeting, where he painted us as selfish newcomers trying to destroy the community spirit. He conveniently left out the part about the land legally belonging to us. That meeting was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. Neighbors I had once chatted with pleasantly now glared at us with open hostility. One woman even stood up and yelled that we should be forced to sell our house and leave if we couldn't be team players. As we left the meeting, I overheard Dave talking to another neighbor. Don't worry, we're not going to let them ruin our fun. I've already got another party planned for next weekend. They can't stop all of us. Sure enough, that Saturday afternoon the woods behind our house were once again filled with people. Music blasted, kids screamed as they raced around, and the smell of grilling meat wafted through the air. Sarah and I watched from our kitchen window, feeling like prisoners in our own home. Maybe we should call the police, Sarah suggested hesitantly. I shook my head. Not yet. I don't want to escalate things that far if we can avoid it. I've got another idea. The next day, I rented a post hole digger and bought a truckload of 4x4 posts and no trespassing signs. I spent the entire day marking out our property line and installing the posts every 10 feet, making sure they were clearly visible from all angles. I'd barely finished hanging the last sign when Tom came storming across the lawn. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he bellowed. I calmly turned to face him. "I'm marking the legal boundaries of my property, as is my right. Is there a problem?" Tom's face was beet red. "You know damn well there's a problem. You can't just put up a fence without homeowner association approval." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, but this isn't a fence. It's just a series of posts. I checked the bylaws very carefully. There's nothing prohibiting this type of landscaping feature." Tom opened and closed his mouth a few times, looking like a fish out of water. Finally he spat out, "This isn't over," before storming off. I knew he was right. This was far from over, but I felt a small sense of victory watching him retreat. The posts did little to deter the next party, which happened the following weekend. If anything, the crowd seemed even larger and rowdier than before. I watched in disbelief as people simply walked between the posts, completely ignoring the no trespassing signs. "That's it," I said to Sarah. "I'm calling the cops." She bit her lip nervously. "Are you sure? That's going to make us even more unpopular around here." "I don't care," I said, already dialing. "This has gone on long enough." 20 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of our house. The officers listened to my explanation, then headed into the woods to break up the party. I watched with grim satisfaction as the crowd slowly dispersed, many shooting nasty looks at our house as they left. One of the officers came back to get my statement. "I've warned them about trespassing, but honestly, sir, this seems like more of a civil matter. You might want to consider taking legal action if it continues." I nodded. "Believe me, we're working on it." The next day, I wasn't surprised to find an official letter from the homeowner association in our mailbox. They were fining us $500 for unapproved landscaping changes, aka my property line posts. I had to laugh at the pettiness of it all. But my amusement faded quickly when the next weekend rolled around, and yet another party kicked off in the woods. This time, someone had gone through the trouble of hanging streamers and balloons from my posts. The message was clear. They were mocking my attempts to claim the land. "Enough is enough," I told Sarah that night. "It's time to bring out the big guns." The next morning, I was waiting on our lawyer's doorstep the moment his office opened. We spent hours going over every detail of the situation, formulating a plan of attack. By the time I left, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Over the next week, we kicked our efforts into high gear. Our lawyer sent official notices to every homeowner in the neighborhood, outlining our property rights and warning of legal consequences for future trespassing. We filed a formal complaint with the county about the homeowner association overstepping its authority. And just to cover all our bases, we even hired a licensed surveyor to reconfirm our exact property boundaries. The response from our neighbors was a mix of anger, disbelief, and begrudging acceptance. A few people reached out privately to apologize, saying they hadn't realized the true nature of the situation. But many others doubled down on their hostility, leaving nasty notes in our mailbox and glaring at us whenever we stepped outside. Tom, of course, was the worst of all. He seemed to make it his personal mission to make our lives miserable. Suddenly, we were getting citations from the homeowner association for every minor infraction imaginable: grass half an inch too long, trash cans left out an hour past pickup, you name it. It was clear he was hoping to nickel and dime us into submission. But we stood our ground. Every fine was contested, every harassing note documented. Slowly but surely, we started to make progress. The county sided with us on the property dispute, officially censuring the homeowner association for overstepping its bounds. This led to an emergency board meeting where Tom was voted out as president. The parties in the woods stopped, but the tension in the neighborhood remained high. Sarah and I felt like pariahs, avoided by most of our neighbors. It was a lonely, stressful time. Just when I was starting to wonder if we'd made a huge mistake by pushing this issue, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dave, the neighbor who had thrown that first party that started this whole mess, showed up on our doorstep one evening. "Hey man," he said awkwardly, "can we talk?" I hesitated, but Sarah nudged me. "Hear him out," she whispered. I stepped outside, crossing my arms defensively. "What is it, Dave?" He shuffled his feet, looking uncomfortable. "Look, I owe you an apology. When I moved in, Tom and the others made it seem like using that land was just something everyone did. I had no idea it actually belonged to you guys." I relaxed slightly. "I appreciate that, Dave, but why the change of heart now?" He sighed. "Honestly, I've been doing some thinking, and I realized how pissed I'd be if someone was using my property without permission. It's not right. What's been happening to you guys? And," he paused, looking sheepish, "I'm worried about liability. If someone got hurt at one of those parties, I could be in serious trouble." I nodded slowly. It wasn't the most altruistic reason, but I'd take it. "So what are you proposing?" "Well, I was thinking, what if we work together to come up with a solution? Something that lets the neighborhood still use the woods sometimes, but respects your property rights?" I considered for a moment. It wasn't a bad idea. "I'm listening." Over the next hour, Dave and I hashed out a rough plan. We'd allow limited use of the wooded area for neighborhood events, but with a formal agreement in place. Any gatherings would need to be approved by us in advance, with proper insurance coverage and cleanup procedures in place. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Dave helped us present the idea to other neighbors. Slowly but surely, people came around to the compromise. Even some of our harshest critics had to admit it was a fair arrangement. We held a neighborhood meeting to formalize the agreement. The atmosphere was tense at first, but as we worked through the details, I could feel the mood shifting. People were actually listening to each other, finding common ground. By the end of the night, we had a signed agreement in place. The woods would be available for 6 pre-approved events per year, with a committee overseeing the planning and execution. Sarah and I would have final say on any decisions, but we promised to be reasonable in our oversight. As people filed out of the meeting, several stopped to shake my hand or offer tentative smiles. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a far cry from the open hostility of a few months ago. Dave lingered behind, a hesitant look on his face. "Hey Jack, I know things have been rough, but I was wondering, would you and Sarah like to come over for a barbecue this weekend? Nothing fancy, just a chance to start fresh." I glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "You know what, Dave? That sounds great. We'd love to." As we walked home that night, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The past few months had been a nightmare, but we'd come through it stronger. We'd stood up for our rights, found a compromise, and maybe even made a few friends in the process. "You know," Sarah said, squeezing my hand, "I think everything's going to be okay." I smiled, looking out at our property, all of it, woods included. "Yeah, I think you're right." The first neighborhood event under the new agreement was held a month later. As I watched kids playing tag between the trees and neighbors chatting over burgers, I felt a sense of pride. This was how it should have been all along. A community coming together, respecting each other's rights and finding ways to share resources. There were still challenges ahead, of course. Some neighbors remained skeptical, and we had to be vigilant about enforcing the new rules. But overall, things were looking up. As the sun began to set on that first successful event, Dave wandered over to where Sarah and I were standing. "I've got to hand it to you," he said, clinking his beer bottle against mine. "You could have just shut this all down, told us all to get lost. Instead, you found a way to make it work for everyone. That's pretty cool." I shrugged, but I couldn't help feeling a little proud. Sometimes you've got to stand your ground to get people to listen. But once they do, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish together. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder, smiling. "You know, for a while there I thought we'd made a huge mistake buying this place. But now, I think we're exactly where we're meant to be." As I looked out over our property, our home, I couldn't have agreed more. It had been a long, hard fight, but in the end, we'd not only protected what was ours, we'd helped build a stronger community in the process. And really, isn't that what being a good neighbor is all about? Update. 2 years have passed since we reached our agreement with the neighborhood about the use of our wooded property. For the most part, things have been running smoothly. We've hosted several successful events, from summer picnics to fall festivals, and the community has generally respected the rules we put in place. But as with any compromise, there have been a few bumps in the road. Last month, we had our first major issue when a group of teenagers decided to throw an unauthorized party in the woods late one Friday night. Sarah and I were awakened around midnight by the sound of loud music and laughter coming from the trees. I threw on some clothes and headed out to investigate, flashlight in hand. As I approached, I could see about a dozen kids scattered around a small clearing, red solo cups in hand and music blaring from a portable speaker. "All right, party's over," I called out as I entered the clearing. "You all need to leave. Now?" There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a flurry of movement as the teens scrambled to gather their things. Most of them looked sheepish and apologetic, but one boy, who I recognized as Tom's son Kevin, stood his ground. "You can't make us leave," he slurred, clearly drunk. "This is public property." I sighed, shining my flashlight directly at him. "Kevin, you know that's not true. We've been over this. This is private property, and you're trespassing. Now, I'm going to give you one chance to leave quietly before I call the cops." Kevin glared at me for a moment, then spat on the ground near my feet. "Whatever, man. You're still an asshole." He stumbled off after his friends, leaving a mess of beer cans and snack wrappers in his wake. I spent the next hour cleaning up the debris, my frustration growing with each piece of trash I picked up. When I finally got back to bed, Sarah was waiting up for me. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I flopped down beside her with a groan. "Yeah, just some kids partying. Got them to leave, but what? I sighed. "I don't know. I thought we were past all this, you know? I thought people understood and respected our position now." Sarah squeezed my hand. "Most of them do, but there's always going to be a few troublemakers. We just have to stay consistent." The next morning, I called Dave, who had become a good friend and ally over the past couple of years. He listened to my account of the previous night with growing concern. "Damn, that's not good," he said when I finished. "Want me to talk to some of the other parents? See if we can nip this in the bud before it becomes a trend?" I agreed, grateful for his support. Over the next week, Dave and I made the rounds, speaking with parents and reinforcing the importance of respecting the property boundaries. Most were horrified to hear about the unauthorized party and promised to have serious talks with their kids. Tom, however, was a different story. When we showed up at his door, he greeted us with his usual scowl. "What do you want now?" I explained the situation as calmly as I could. "We're just asking for your help in reminding the kids about the rules we all agreed to." Kevin was there. So what? Tom interrupted. "They're teenagers? Teenagers party. Stop being such a stick in the mud." I felt my temper rising but forced myself to stay calm. "Tom, this isn't about having fun. It's about respecting private property and following the rules we all agreed to. If Kevin or any of the other kids had gotten hurt..." "Oh, here we go with the liability crap again," Tom sneered. "You know what? I'm sick of your rules and your committees. This neighborhood was better before you showed up." Before I could respond, he slammed the door in our faces. Dave and I stood there for a moment, stunned. "Well," Dave said finally, "I guess some people never change." Over the next few weeks, we noticed an uptick in small acts of vandalism around our property. Nothing major, just things like trash dumped in the woods, a couple of our no trespassing signs torn down, that sort of thing. We couldn't prove it was Kevin or his friends, but the timing seemed suspicious. Sarah and I discussed our options. We could escalate things, start calling the police for every minor incident, but that felt like it would only increase tensions in the neighborhood. "What if we tried a different approach?" Sarah suggested one night. "Instead of just focusing on enforcement, what if we gave the teens a reason to respect the woods?" I raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" Sarah's idea was brilliant in its simplicity. We would organize a youth conservation project, enlisting local teens to help with trail maintenance, invasive species removal, and wildlife monitoring in our woods. It would give them a sense of ownership and responsibility for the area, while also providing valuable community service hours for college applications. We presented the idea at the next neighborhood meeting, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Even some of the parents who had been skeptical of us in the past seemed enthusiastic about the project. To my surprise, Kevin was one of the first teens to sign up. When I asked him why, he shrugged and mumbled, "Beats sitting around all summer, I guess." The project kicked off on a sunny Saturday in June. About 20 teenagers showed up, along with a handful of parents to supervise. We split into groups, each tackling a different task. I found myself working alongside Kevin, clearing a patch of invasive honeysuckle. At first, we worked in awkward silence, but as the morning wore on, he started to open up. "You know," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "I used to think you were just some uptight jerk who wanted to ruin everyone's fun. But this is actually pretty cool." I chuckled. "Thanks, I think. You know, when I was your age, I probably would have thought the same thing about someone in my position." Kevin nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, I get it now. This place? It's special. We should take care of it." By the end of the day, we had cleared several trails, removed bags of invasive plants, and even spotted a few interesting species of birds and small mammals. The teens were tired but seemed genuinely proud of their work. As everyone was packing up to leave, I overheard Kevin talking to a group of his friends. "Hey, you guys want to come back next weekend? I was thinking we could build some birdhouses or something." I couldn't help but smile. It seemed our plan was working better than we'd hoped. Over the next few months, the youth conservation project took on a life of its own. The teens started organizing their own workdays, coming up with new projects and ideas to improve the woods. They created a social media account to document their efforts, and even started a friendly competition with youth groups in neighboring towns. The impact on the community was noticeable. Incidents of vandalism and unauthorized use of the woods dropped to almost zero. Parents reported that their kids were spending more time outdoors and showing a newfound interest in environmental issues. Even Tom seemed to be coming around. I spotted him one day watching from his backyard as Kevin led a group of younger kids on a nature walk through the woods. There was an unmistakable look of pride on his face. A year after we started the project, we held a community celebration in the woods. Tables laden with potluck dishes lined the main clearing, and strings of solar-powered lights twinkled in the trees. Kids played tag between the trunks while adults chatted and laughed. As the sun began to set, Kevin approached the makeshift stage we'd set up. He cleared his throat nervously, and the crowd fell silent. Hi everyone," he began. "I just wanted to say a few words about this past year. When Jack and Sarah first moved here and started enforcing the property lines, I thought they were the worst. I mean, these woods had always been our hangout spot, you know?" There were a few chuckles from the crowd. Kevin grinned and continued. "But then they started this conservation project, and it opened my eyes. I realized that sometimes, taking care of something means setting boundaries. It means respecting the land and the people around you." He turned to where Sarah and I were standing. "So, I just wanted to say thanks. Thanks for not giving up on us, even when we were being jerks. Thanks for showing us how to be better stewards of this amazing place." The crowd burst into applause. I felt Sarah squeeze my hand, and I looked over to see tears in her eyes. As the party wound down, Dave ambled over to us, a cold beer in each hand. He passed them to us with a grin. "You know," he said, "when you guys first moved in and all that drama started, I never would have guessed we'd end up here. You turned a property dispute into something that's brought this whole community together. That's pretty amazing. I shrugged, feeling a bit embarrassed by the praise. We just did what felt right, stood our ground when we needed to, but also tried to find a way to make things work for everyone. Sarah nodded. It wasn't always easy, but I think it was worth it. This place, these people, it really feels like home now. As we stood there, watching the fireflies begin to twinkle in the deepening twilight, I felt a profound sense of contentment. We had faced challenges, stood up for what was right, and in the end, helped create something beautiful. The woods that had once been a source of conflict were now the heart of our community. And as I looked around at the smiling faces of our neighbors, people who had gone from adversaries to friends, I knew we had found exactly where we belonged. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.